Now on the APEC VIP hotline, cutting-edge training for the serious athlete, apecgo.com from rattleandhumsports.com. It's Kevin Lonnquist covering the Big 12. How you doing, Kevin?
Always good to be with you, Bryan. I'm doing great. Thanks.
Thanks for coming on with us. Well, let's talk a little bit about some of these big ball games. The one that just jumps off the page, obviously, two top 20 teams, Baylor and West Virginia, meeting this weekend.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun up there in Morgantown this weekend with West Virginia playing its first Big 12 game. This has been pretty well anticipated over the last 11 months when the conference obviously announced the addition of the Mountaineers, and then when they came out with the schedule, and everyone had been targeting September 29th for that game against the Bears. It's obviously going to be a raucous atmosphere. People up in West Virginia said if the game had been scheduled for the night, it probably would have been even worse. But with it being a noon kickoff out there, Eastern time, at 11 o'clock back here in Texas, it's still going to have a great festive moment to it. And, yeah, I think that Baylor will play as well as it possibly can. I don't think the Bears are going to win the game because it just had too many defensive issues. But I think the Bears can hang with the Mountaineers. And I mean, the one thing I'm finding about this conference right now, Bryan, is the fact that I don't think we have an elite team in this conference, a la Alabama or LSU or USC or somebody along those lines, or Oregon. We don't have that just yet. And I think that this first weekend for West Virginia is their opportunity to kind of put their foothold as being one of those top teams if they can take care of business. If they struggle with the Bears and have struggles with their running game, something we talked about last week previewing their game against Maryland, and that didn't come to pass, is I think there's going to be, if they really struggle, I think you could have a really wide-open Big 12 race.
What do you make of Baylor having to struggle just to get out alive? I know it was a hostile atmosphere, and UL Monroe is a really good football team, but they really had to struggle to get out of there last week.
Yeah, it went the way that we kind of talked about last week, the fact that the Bears were going to have to survive a difficult first quarter against the Warhawks, and I could probably keep it a 1-score game or a 10-0 game, and it was a little bit worse because Nick Florence threw 2 picks, and they were behind 14-0 to start the second quarter. But, you know, the good thing about the Bears is that they found something within themselves, the resolve to rally against a team like Louisiana Monroe. Now, on the surface, the average fan may look at Monroe and not know much about them other than the fact that while they pulled off the shocker at Arkansas, they took Auburn to overtime, but who are they really? Mm-hmm. And but nonetheless, when you go on the road to play a college football game or a college basketball game or whatever, when you win on the road, it's a good win because it's never easy. Fans are going to get jacked up, and as we talked about, that was the only game on the college schedule last week. It was their home opener, so Baylor really had to be emotionally ready. And I thought that once they got through the first quarter, their defense picked it up a little bit. Their defense still has a lot of problems. Man, if you're Art Browse and Phil Bennett, you got to tear your hair out because it's just the gobs of yards that they're giving. I mean, Baylor's giving up nearly 500 yards a game and total yards a game defensively, Bryan, and that's just a real issue for them. But their offense is so good and their wide receivers are so good. I don't think anyone in the nation can really stop them. I mean, it's going to be Baylor stopping itself on just miscommunications or execution issues than anything else. I truly believe that. And that's why I give them a shot at West Virginia this week.
Okay, good enough. Kevin Lonnquist, rattleandhumsports.com on Bryan Houston Sports Radio Live. Texas and Oklahoma State, I have no clue how good Texas is after the non-conference schedule they've played, and I'm not sure we're going to learn a whole lot even tomorrow night. What do you think?
Well, I think we'll get to know the Longhorns a little bit better. I mean, the one thing that Oklahoma State has to decide is what they're going to do with Wes Lunt, their quarterback. Their injury report is supposed to come out today, Friday, about what his status is going to be for the game if they don't start him or even play him, although the Oklahoma media is speculating that he's not going to play. But if they don't, they would go with redshirt freshman J.W. Walsh. I think with Texas is concerned that, again, the point I mentioned a moment ago about going on the road and winning the football game in college athletics, especially in conference play.
Right.
It's very important, and it's very difficult to do, and the Longhorns have lost the last 2 meetings with the Cowboys and really been kind of owned by the Cowboys in those 2 matchups. So I think for Texas, they've got to play well. David Ash has got to play well. I think we'll know a little bit more about them on this game tomorrow night. They've got to, the one thing, the key thing to keep in mind with this game tomorrow night, Bryan, which is, the Fox National game, is Texas hasn't turned the ball over this year. Only one turnover through the first 3 games. They've really done a great job of making sure that they are protecting the football, both running and passing it, as far as Ash making good decisions and things of that nature. Oklahoma State's defense, the dirty little secret of Oklahoma State's team last year is as good as it was going to the Fiesta Bowl and beating Stanford was that defense gave up a ton of yards, but it lived on the edge because it forced so many turnovers. Forced 44 turnovers to lead the nation last year. This year they only have 3. Now, I know that they didn't have Bill Young, their defensive coordinator, for the first 2 games, but the thing is that they are still not turning people over to set up their offense on a shorter field or things of that nature that really puts them in an opportunistic spot to score. So if Texas secures the football, I think the Longhorns are going to win. But here's the other thing. The Longhorns still have 2 more challenging games after that, because after this week with Oklahoma State, they get West Virginia at home next week, and then they come back up to Dallas for the Cotton Bowl, into the Cotton Bowl to face OU.
Going to be a grind, no question about that.
Yeah, we're going to really know a lot about if the Longhorns are going to be the team of the mid-2000s or if they're going to be the team that we've seen in 2010 and 2011.
Yeah, and that remains to be seen right now. Now, I know the Texas Tech-Iowa State game is not real sexy, but it's 2 3-0 teams, and you feel like this game's got a lot of importance in it.
Yeah, I do. I think for 2 reasons. One, Tommy Tuberville, got the start that he wanted. His running game is in better shape at Tech than he's ever had it there, at least in his belief it is. Eric Stevens, the running back who was out for the year with a knee injury last year, appears to be pretty healthy, seems to be getting, full strength, running with some confidence. But they're going to face a really big challenge at Iowa State with that great linebacker core led by Naughton and A.J. Klein. And I think the one thing about Tech is that they've got to make sure that they can establish that so they can give Seth Dagey a chance to throw the football. And I think for Tommy Tuberville, a lot of questions about his job security came into this season. So if he finds a way to win that game up there in Ames, that really puts him in a pretty good position, because then he'll have a winnable game against KU. He'll give himself a chance, against Baylor, even though that game is at Cowboy Stadium. It just puts Tech in a better position. They lose that game, and then they're really going to be up against it. I think it's the same thing with Iowa State. Again, Paul Rhodes has done a great job getting his team prepared. They're the one team this year with Iowa State, and I've been really intrigued with just the way that they've gone about their business. They're not a real sexy team. Steele Janks is a game manager at the quarterbacking position. He won the job a couple weeks before the season opener against Tulsa, but he really seems to be coming into his own and just taking care of the football, not making mistakes. And if Iowa State finds a way to win that game, same thing for them, puts them in a better position to be bowl eligible.
And again, here's another ball game. I'm not sure about this TCU team. They play at SMU, the Battle of the Iron Skillet. We know SMU's not very good. Shouldn't be a big problem for TCU, but they tend to kind of beat themselves.
Yeah, I tell a lot of people that I watched them last week against Virginia, and the things that stick out for me for TCU is that, one, it's a very talented team, no question about it. It's a very young team, which means that with young teams, you're going to get a lot of silly and dumb mistakes, which is what they do. The other thing that stands out for me is that the Horned Frogs are starting to develop a fumble problem here. They had 4 fumbles against Kansas 2 weeks ago, and 3 of those inside the 10-yard line, which really cost them several points and a chance to really blow out the Jayhawks. And then last week against Virginia, they had a fumble that went through the end zone that on a play that where Sky Dawson should have been down at the 5-yard line. He tried to struggle to fight for extra yards. The ball got punched out, went through the end zone, went for a touchback. And then Casey Paul, I think the Horned Frogs, just as long as Casey's going to be playing quarterback for them, they're always going to be walking the tightrope with him, because he will just lock in and make the decision that just makes you scratch your head and say, why did he do that? Because he made a play down in the red zone last week where he double-clutched, and as soon as he double-clutched, you could just see it, that he's like, I'm going to try and force this ball in there, and sure enough, he threw a pick at the 3-yard line, which really killed him. So if the Horned Frogs can keep the turnovers at a minimum, they should win this game against SMU fairly comfortably. I mean, I'm thinking something like 36-7 along those lines. I mean, it should not be really much of a game. I don't think the Mustangs are a really very well-coached team, but that's another story for another show. But I also think, too, that TCU is just better. I mean, they're younger than SMU as a whole, but they're just better. in SMU, and they should win this game comfortably.
Okay, now I want to ask you about Oklahoma. Last week they got beat by what appears to be a really good Kansas State team. I know you got West Virginia on top in your power rankings right now, but Kansas State's got to be right there, right behind them. But what's the deal with Oklahoma? It seems like Landry Jones has just regressed as a quarterback over the last couple of years.
Now, well, number one, I don't want to take anything away from Kansas State because they went down there. Bob Stoops has lost 4 or 5 games in his tenure down there at OU in Norman, so that's a pretty incredible feat. But you can really make the argument that Kansas State is the best team in the conference. I mean, I came very close to switching them, but I'm like, you know what, I've kept West Virginia 1, and I'll keep them there. My problem with OU is that something happened to them last year. When they lost at home to Tech. Remember that night there at Tech where the game got delayed by the thunderstorms and all that stuff? And It was just such a bizarre atmosphere. And they wound up losing the football game. And then they just never got it back. And you made the point about Landry Jones regressing, and I think there is something to that. I don't know if it's a mechanical thing with him or if it's more of a confidence thing with him. I would tend to lean toward the latter. But, just watching him against Kansas State, the Cardinals sit at the fumble down at his 1-yard line, which K-State picks up and walks into the end zone with the easy touchdown there. That's totally on him. Yeah, the offensive line didn't make the adjustments and give him the protection, but you've got to hang on to the football there, especially knowing where you are on that part of the football field. And I think there really seems to be something mentally going on with Landry that he just is not playing with the kind of confidence that he needs right now. And again, I think somewhere along the line, OU has lost its edge. Can they get it back? Are we starting to see where, to use the phrase, jump the shark, but have we reached a point where the Bob Stoops era has jumped the shark with the Tech game last year? I don't know, but we're starting to see more signs of that where OU is not playing with the toughness that you're used to seeing that they're playing with, even though they brought Mike Stoops back to be their defensive coordinator. Is it just a case where they're just not playing at the level and have they come as far in the Stoops era that they can possibly go? I don't know. There's just something there that's not right. They have a week off to fix this, and then they've got to get the ship right again next week. I just have some concerns about that. If they play well against Texas in 2 weeks, then you're going to say, okay, everything's fine with the Sooners, and they might be back, and this was just kind of a funk. But if they struggle against Texas in the Cotton Bowl and lose that game, I think the season could really start to slide on them.
They may be in the position that Texas was in where they have to start thinking about reinventing themselves before long.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that. I know that Bob wanted to spread the ball out by bringing all these quarterbacks in. They've got a commitment from a kid from Colleyville Heritage by the name of Cody Thomas, who's got a great arm. He's a great rushing quarterback. He's also a great baseball player too. And I think that and it's the only it's the quarterback that they really zeroed in on, and they got something worked out with him. If they do reinvent themselves, I think that he can be the guy that can help them do it. I personally think, though, that OU is just going to have to get more physical. How do you get that way? Do you change your off-season program? Do you change your offensive philosophy? Do you change the way you do things defensively from a technical standpoint? I think if the season really goes upside down on the Sooners again to the point where they finish like 8-4 or 9-3 again or something like that, but you're not seeing them with that big bad OU persona to them, I think they are going to have to maybe make some major shifts on how they do things from a philosophical standpoint.
Good stuff, Kevin. We do appreciate it. Again, you can check out all of his Big 12 writings on rattleandhumpsports.com. Thanks again for coming on with us today, man.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Bryan.
Good talking to you. Kevin Lonnquist from rattleandhumpsports.com on Bryan Houston Sports Radio Live on 99.3 Talk FM.